He had been drinking real coffee since he was 16, not the substitute powder they had been rationing for the last 2 years of the war. The ersatz mixture of grain and chicory that smelled almost right and tasted completely wrong. Real coffee, dark and bitter, the kind his mother made every morning in a small pot on the stove. He had missed it the way you miss something so ordinary it didn't feel important until it was gone. So when the tin cup arrived that first morning and he lifted it and smelled what was inside, his first reaction was disappointment. His second reaction was laughter. He said it to no one in particular, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "This isn't real coffee." The men around him laughed too. Not cruelly, just the laughter of men who have recognized something they expected. They had been warned by others who passed through earlier camps. "Don't expect much," they had said. "The Americans don't know what coffee is." So the laughter was almost rehearsed. Lifted cups, skeptical expressions, comments in German that built on each other until the whole table was involved. The American cook stood at the serving window and watched this happen. He had seen it before. Every German unit that came through did exactly the same thing. He waited until the laughter settled. His expression didn't change. Then he said, in the flat English of someone making a simple statement of fact, "Drink it anyway." The translator repeated it in German. The table went quiet. Nobody moved. Then the man who had started it all looked at his cup. He looked at the cook. He looked back at his cup. He drank. The camp sat in the middle of a flat stretch of Tennessee farmland, a converted agricultural depot with long, low buildings and a yard that smelled of cut wood and diesel. There were 41 German prisoners, all men, all captured in the final months of the Western campaign. Infantry, artillery crews, a few signals officers, one former tank mechanic who had been repurposed into a supply driver and captured 3 weeks before the armistice. They had been processed through 2 facilities before arriving here, and both had been forgettable in the way that difficult things are forgettable. Not pleasant, not terrible, simply the machinery of captivity doing what captivity's machinery does. This camp was different in ways that were hard to articulate. The guards were present but not aggressive. The work assignments were clear. The food was plain but consistent. And on the first morning when the breakfast trays arrived and the tin cups came with them, something happened that set the tone for everything that followed. The coffee. The man who had laughed first was named Werner. He had been a corporal in an infantry unit outside Aachen, a school teacher before the war, a man who had spent 4 years learning to take orders from people younger and less educated than himself, and had gotten very good at it. He had a dry sense of humor that had kept him sane through the worst of it and had gotten him into trouble twice. He was 34 years old and had not seen his wife or his 2 daughters in 11 months. He had not intended to start something at breakfast. The laughter had been involuntary, the kind that comes out before you decide whether to let it. He had looked at the pale, thin liquid in his cup, and the words had just appeared. But now the cook had said drink it anyway, and the translator had translated, and the table was quiet, and Werner was looking at his cup. He drank. It was not good coffee. He was not going to pretend it was good coffee. It was mild and slightly sweet in a way that suggested someone had added something to it, and it was nowhere near strong enough, and it tasted nothing like the coffee he had been missing for 2 years. But it was warm, and it was real. Not ersatz, not powder, not the brown water they had been drinking in the field. Whatever else it was actually coffee. He set the cup down. He looked at the serving window. The cook had already moved on to the next task. Werner said quietly to the man beside him, "It's not good." The man beside him said, "I know." Werner said, "But it's not nothing." The man picked up his own cup and drank. That afternoon, the work assignments were posted on the board near the main door. Timber cutting, road maintenance, kitchen support, a small group assigned to help on a nearby farm. Werner's name was on the farm detail. He had been a school teacher, not a farmer, but the army had taught him that what you were before the war had very little to do with what you were asked to do during it. The farm was 3 kilometers from camp. They walked it under light guard, 2 American soldiers, both young, both carrying their rifles in the casual way of people who don't expect to need them. The morning was cold and clear, the kind of Tennessee autumn that Werner had never experienced and could not have imagined from the damp gray winters of the Rhineland. The farmer met them at the gate. He was a large man in his 60s, overalls, and a brown coat. The particular self-possession of someone who has worked the same land for 40 years and is not easily impressed by anything. He looked at the German prisoners with the direct appraisal of someone sizing up labor rather than enemy, nodded once, and said something to the guard. The guard translated, "He says you're harvesting corn today. He'll show you how he wants it done." Werner had never harvested corn. He said nothing about this. He watched the farmer demonstrate and he copied what he saw, and by mid-morning he was moving reasonably well through the rows. At midday the farmer's wife appeared from the house carrying a large pot and a stack of tin bowls. She set them on a wooden table near the fence without looking at anyone, and went back inside. The guard looked at the pot and then at the prisoners. He said, "Lunch." Werner approached the table. He ladled soup into a bowl, thick, dark, with pieces of something he couldn't identify floating in it. He sat on the ground with his back against the fence and ate. It was good, not complicated, not remarkable, but genuinely good in the way that food is good when it has been made by someone who cooks to feed people rather than to fulfill a requirement. He ate the whole bowl and sat for a moment looking at the empty thing in his hands. The guard sat nearby, eating his own bowl. He noticed Werner looking at the pot. He said, "You want more?" Werner said, "Yes." The guard said, "Go ahead." Werner went back to the pot. He ladled more soup. He came back and sat and ate this too, and there was something about the ease of it, the simple fact of asking for more and being told to go ahead, that was harder to process than it should have been. In the system he had operated in for 4 years, wanting more was something you kept to yourself. That evening at dinner the coffee arrived again. Same tin cups, same pale brown liquid. The men at Werner's table looked at it with the weary recognition of a recurring problem. Someone said, "Still not real coffee." Someone else said, "No." A pause. Werner picked up his cup. He said, "Drink it anyway." The table laughed. Not the surprised laughter of the first morning, the comfortable laughter of a joke that belongs to the group now. Werner drank. The others drank. The cook at the serving window heard the laughter. He didn't look up from his work, but something in his posture shifted slightly. The small adjustment of someone who has heard something they expected to hear eventually. The days that followed settled into a pattern: morning coffee, work detail, midday meal, evening coffee, the pattern of a place that intended to function, and did. Werner thought about the coffee more than was reasonable. Not because it was good, it remained stubbornly, consistently not good, but because of what it represented. He had arrived at the camp expecting a world organized around punishment, around the demonstration of power, around the insistence that the defeated understand their defeat in every possible dimension, including what they were given to drink in the morning. The coffee was not part of that logic. The farmer's wife's soup was not part of that logic. The guard who said go ahead was not part of that logic. He was not ready to call it kindness. That word felt like more than he could verify. But it was something. It was a system that didn't require him to perform his defeat every hour of every day, that allowed a man to say this isn't real coffee, and be told drink it anyway, and be given a second bowl of soup when he asked. One morning toward the end of November, the breakfast trays arrived, and the tin cups came with them, and Werner lifted his cup and smelled what was inside. The same pale brown, the same mild sweetness. Nothing had changed about the coffee. He drank it without comment. The man beside him watched this and said, "No opinion today?" Werner set the cup down. He thought about it. Then he said, "It's not good." The man nodded. Werner said, "But I've had worse." The man picked up his own cup. Neither of them said anything else. The mess hall continued around them, 40 men eating breakfast in a camp in Tennessee in November, the small sounds of tin on wood and quiet conversation, and the particular rhythm of a morning that was going to be like the morning before it and the morning after it, which was its own kind of thing, not comfort exactly, but something in the neighborhood of it. Outside, the cook was already preparing lunch.